everyone, and welcome to our talk episode for the Cheating Cheaters episode of the podcast.
Hi, I'm Laura. I'm your other host.
We're here with all our actors, minus Shakira and Aileen,
Who we miss dearly.
who we miss dearly. We're going to get started with some dramaturgy from Alex.
Hey, what's going on? Time to do some dramaturgy. So I just never know how to start the dramaturgy section. I hope you'll keep that part in. Okay, great. Well, here's a fun fact that I should start off with, which is, as Lauren has mentioned at the beginning of the play portion, it was requested to do a play that people don't know super well. So the play that was chosen, not only do people in general not know it super well, but there's just like very little information on it. So I'm focusing a little bit less on the play itself. Also, there's not exactly huge like socio-political implications with this play because it is just kind of like
What?
a silly, goofy crime farce. Yeah, it turns out not a whole lot of social commentary. I mean, I do have some thoughts that I actually didn't put in the dramaturgy that I could go into about the ending and the messaging of the ending. But basically, I'm going to be talking more about how this as a piece of text, as a piece of entertainment, fits into the larger zeitgeist within which it was produced. So, when was it produced? Let's talk about that. This was first produced on Broadway in 1916, and I thought this was hilarious. The New York Times reviewed it, and they said, and I quote, "An interesting play that is entertaining all the way through." Because damn, standards for entertainment were really low in 1916.
Ouch.
And that's kind of like, honestly, the general theme of the stuff that I discovered and kind of put together. And there was a really interesting article in a publication called The Evening World, and it talked about how this play was fine, but it was entertainment, quote, of the moment. And when I first read that, I thought it meant like, oh, it is representative of a certain cultural movement. But in the context of the article, when I had a look at it, what it really meant was, okay, this is like fun and entertaining when you watch it, but it's not like you're going to be thinking years later, like, oh, hey, remember when I watched that like silly crime heist show, you know? And it was criticizing this idea of theater that is only for an evening of fun. And it said that the play served so we're only past the evening, and oh yes, it said that plays of this type are, and I quote, a despair of the stage. So essentially, it was not groundbreaking, but it was part of a larger trend. It was really hard for me to find a specific trend that crime farce fit into. So I broke it into two pieces, crime and farce. So crime fiction got super popular around the 1800s because who was writing in the 1800s? Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. So everyone was like, whoa, crime? This is so cool. Sherlock Holmes? Bonkers. So that's what kind of started this pop culture trend that people were interested in crime. The golden age of crime novels is said to be around the 1920s and 30s, so after this play was produced. This play, of course, is very much less about the crime and more about the farce. So it's interesting that crime as a topic for fiction, this was kind of in between Doyle and like Agatha Christie. But let's take a second to look more at farce as a genre. So the term farce is derived from the French word for stuffing in reference to the improvisations applied by actors to medieval dramas. So farces go way, way back. The oldest surviving farce may be a show called The Boy and the Blind Man from 1266, which is nuts. Farce is also very closely connected to vaudeville. Vaudeville is a much more recent type of theater. So vaudeville was a kind of entertainment in the early 1900s that basically the entire idea of it is exactly what that reviewer in the Evening World was talking about. Entertainment with no moral intentions. It's just a good time and that's it. Except, of course, there are moral implications because there always are. Vaudeville had its roots in minstrelsy. Minstrelsy... I forgot we can't curse on this podcast. I was going to say very but I can't say that.
You can say very I'll just bleep it.
Okay. Minstrelsy. Very up, and vaudeville was often referred to as a farce with music because music was a very important part of vaudeville acts. So this show would not have been considered a vaudeville act because usually they were put together of a bunch of different pieces, a bunch of individual acts. But a lot of the humor in the acts would be farcical. It had a bit of everything, so everyone could be satisfied. Because if you're going out for a night on the town and it's 1916 and you can't, I sound very silly being like, in 1916, they didn't have Netflix. I don't know if you know that. But what I'm trying to say is we kind of forget that when your options are limited and you want a little bit of everything, where are you going to go? Which was my kind of also hypothesis as to why there's some genre bending going on in this play. So that's a bit about the two trends this fits into. Let me talk for a bit about my kind of observations and conclusions. So I don't know if anyone picked up on this connection, but when I first read this, or rather listened to it, actually, I would like to talk for a second about the 1932 radio production, because I find that very interesting. When I first listened to this, it reminded me of a lot of the kind of crime comedy films that came shortly after this period. So I was like, oh, this seems to kind of predate a lot of films in this genre. And the examples that I thought of were His Girl Friday, which is not really crime, but it's about journalism about crime. And it was based on The Front Page, which was a play from 1928. And Laura actually pointed out while I was talking about this, when I was doing this research, that a lot of screenwriters during the sort of genesis of spoken film were originally playwrights. So there were a lot of play adaptations that started on stage and came to screen. So I imagine that's probably part of the reason that plays from this period have a lot in common with the films that would come shortly after, once films became, a viable option for entertainment. Oh, the also example I gave was Bringing Up Baby. Big Bringing Up Baby vibes. So my conclusion is that it's a combination of the joy of cheap, non-moralistic entertainment plus the thrill of a detective story that became so popular in the late 19th century. And that Max Marcin was like, hey, this is a thing that people like. This is a thing that people like. Let me capitalize on these two trends, put it all together, because if someone's choosing what to do with their evening, you got a little bit of both. That's my thought about where this play came from and what this style and genre led to, which is this genre of film later on.
Thank you, Alex. I
Which
love
brought
that.
us the Great Muppet Caper.
And
Which brought us the Great
eventually,
Muppet Caper.
yeah, this was that we can directly relate this play to the Great Muppet Caper.
I wanted to note that, so there were multiple adaptations of this play, including someone said 2 film adaptations, and I'm going to believe them because I don't remember what I read.
There was one silent film, and then there was
Oh my God, you're right.
Fay Ray film in like the 30s or 40s, something like that.
Okay, now that you say it, I do remember that I'm reading that there was a silent film and a talkie. There was also a 1932 radio adaptation, which I listened to because I thought it was just going to be an audio version of this play. So I listened to it in preparation to do this play, and interestingly enough, it wasn't. It was a completely different script, but with the same plot, and I find it very interesting because I'm not sure why they made the choices they made. For one thing, they condensed it a lot. There were far fewer characters. When I saw the cast list and I saw that I was going to be Phil and Holmes, I was like, who the is that? They were not in the radio version. The radio version starts on the boat. They keep talking about the boat that hit a mine. The radio version starts on that boat, and instead of hitting a mine, it hits an iceberg. But I don't know why you would change it to
make it more like the Titanic.
Like, hey, remember that.
People didn't worry about hurting other people's feelings in the 20th century.
They did not. My theory is that they wanted to make it more relevant because in 1916, World War I.
Drew, you were a history major. What do you know?
It's 1940. It ended in 1918.
Okay.
So yeah, they're very clearly talking about like the war in Europe, which
Okay. So
is
they
just
are
World
they
War.
are talking about World War One.
Yeah, it wasn't called
Okay.
World War One then, but
Well, no. Back then we called it the Great War.
They did call it World War One before World War Two started, though. It started
Really?
like the first instance of it being called World
that's
War
kinda
One is
hilarious.
before World War Two happened, which
that's
is
funny.
very
Ooh.
disappointing.
like, hey,
Oof.
I just think a time traveler. That's what I think about that.
in the same reason we don't call World War II the last World War.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh no.
So my thought is that they wanted to make it more relevant because the ship hit a mine that had to do with World War One, which was happening at the time that this play went up, and they were like, okay, that's so passe. Let's do something else. Remember the Titanic? Let's do that.
Well, one thought that stuck out to me is that I think the Lusitania sank in a similar way, like the year before this play was produced. In that it wasn't a mine; it got torpedoed supposedly by
missile.
a German
Yeah.
U-boat or something. So I wonder if
They have a very similar name for the ship too. Like I forget what it's called, but
it's just like
It's like the Terminatia or something like that.
It's Termania. The Termania.
It's the Terminus or something.
I love the idea that in 1916 they were just like, let's mine recent tragedies that widely affected
Yeah,
the world.
remember how all those people died? Yeah, I can't get over the way that they just casually mention only one time. They keep referencing, oh, you're such a hero, and then they're like, and 500 people died.
Because they really make it sound, everywhere else, they really make it sound like he saved them all.
Yeah, they make it sound like he saved the entire boat. But no, it's just that he made sure that the women and children got off first, and that's what made him a hero. But everyone else died.
Another hint about Ferris, anyway.
Oh, yes.
Oh, yeah.
A good
I just
hint.
realized.
Oh,
just put
that-
it together.
wow.
Oh yeah.
Wait, what's the hint?
That all the women and children got off safely.
Oh.
And then also Mr. Brockton.
And also, yeah, that's the other thing that gets
rich
me
people.
is, and also the rich, and he found a log, so he was fine.
But also, why was there a lot? I mean, it seemed like a weird plot device. Like, oh yeah, you know how oceans just have logs floating in them. Like, what? What? What do you mean you found a log?
Driftwood.
I would love to see a production of this where they staged the shipwreck as like a pre-show. That would be fun.
Yeah. It was bizarre to listen to, and now reading it, I actually preferred it because in the radio version, it's so funny. It starts with the scene that they're describing where it's like, remember when we were sitting on the deck in the moonlight? And the radio version, it starts, we're sitting on the deck in the moonlight. Oh, what a coincidence that we were both seated next to each other and we met. Oh, it's so wonderful. Oh, I'm so in love with you. Oh God, the ship hit an iceberg. Oh no. And then there are gunshots and because Tom is shooting his gun and he goes, everybody, let the women and children on first, or I'll
my
shoot
God.
you.
or I'll shoot you.
Yes. And then the entire play for the rest of it is the same. Where they're like, we gotta give him a medal for that. And I'm like, I don't know. He threatened to shoot people.
All the rich people, women, and children to the front.
Yeah. He's a hero to the rich. Which is another thing that I didn't put this in my dramaturgy document, but I did want to make sure that I noted it kind of in the while we're discussing about that this was intended to be just like some fun entertainment with nothing moralistic about it. I do find it so fascinating that it does end up being very moralistic at the end, in that it's like you did a bad thing and now you have to repay your debt to society, when in fact the only people they were stealing from were rich people. So it still ends on this note of, but it was still wrong and rich people are don't steal from them. And I just love that line where she's like, I'm going to put you to work. And they're like, no, not work. We've never worked before. Because it seems to so clearly get across this idea of like, oh, those lazy poor people. When in fact, they've been working so goddamn hard the entire play. So it is interesting that everything that I read about like this genre and this play was like, it's not heavy. It's not moralistic. There's no themes. When in actuality, it is moralistic, but in not an intentional way, but in a like, this is just like what's acceptable and what we believe. Like it wasn't on purpose, but it was just a kind of reflection of societal.
It reminds me a little bit of have you all seen the Ocean's 11 movies, like the original and then the more popular version?
Mhm.
Oh, so like the whole basic plot is that a bunch of sort of Las Vegas entertainers, etc., decide to rob a bunch of casinos. So in the newer, more popular version, they get away with it. But in the '60s, it was widely criticized because they get away with it completely. But at the very end, in like the last 3 minutes, they revealed that they hid all of the money in this guy's coffin. And they don't find out until they're at the funeral that he's being cremated in front of everyone. So they sit there and watch all the money burn in the coffin.
Oh, I love that.
Another thought that I kind of had, that it's not quite as jewel heisty, that's not really the parallel, but when you talk about like this need for entertainment that's just for entertainment's sake and stuff, I feel like a modern example of that isn't quite high art, isn't quite low art, just like is there to be art, is almost like the Marvel movies in a way to me, which are also very political in nature and like have kind of a very imperialistic tone, a militaristic tone or whatever, but like they're just kind of seen as a fun way to spend 2 hours.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I think that's such a good comparison because that's like exactly what they're intended to be, is like this is just a good time. But what they end up doing is reflecting societal values that the company making it thinks, yeah, people are going to agree with this. Like this is like it's not exactly like they were like, oh, we got to deal with the military industrial complex, so we better make Iron Man the good guy. It's more like, oh, this is just like what's going to be acceptable to people.
Yeah.
Okay, excellent. I really enjoyed that conversation about the parallels there, and excellent dramaturgy from Alex. Thank you.
Thank you.
We're gonna move on into what we cut. There wasn't a lot that we cut this time. We did replace a word. I don't know if you can use the word archaic to describe something that was relevant in the early 20th century, but there was an archaic-esque racial slur that we noticed in the play. So we ended up cutting that because we don't want to say racial slurs on this podcast. We said schmucks instead. Thank you, JJ. And then the other thing that we cut, that we almost did, and then we cut because we thought it maybe wasn't the most culturally sensitive thing in the world, is that Verity is supposed to be speaking in an Italian accent the whole time, and we're like, I had taken that to mean that the way that I read it, I thought it is supposed to be someone faking an Italian accent, like that is the bit. Alex read it as like, this is actually an Italian immigrant, and that is the bit. River, do you want to speak at all to the choice with the Italian accent and us cutting it?
Oh, sure. When I initially read it, my understanding was somewhere like a hybrid of those two understandings, and I had read it as though Antonio Verdi, or Tony the Wop, was which I think is very funny because the word WAP is only used for him once in the script, so it's funny that it puts that in the character description. But my understanding was that he was very likely like a Brooklyn Italian man who puts on the affect of like
his
a man
grandfather.
from Italy, exactly, to do the whole ruse and everything. So initially when we read it, the role had been done kind of with a very exaggerated Italian accent all the way through, but yeah, we just didn't want to open a can of worms with that, and so it felt more comfortable to go for some other straight, because he's very clearly supposed to be like the character man, but just like some strange voice to differentiate him.
Yeah.
And I love the voice that you ended up with.
Thank you.
Yeah,
I told
the voice that you ended up with was still great.
It was very inspired by Jim Carrey in A Series of Unfortunate Events.
Yes, and you nailed it. I knew, because I watched that movie last night.
A
And
little
I know
Owen
exactly
Wilson,
which
too.
character.
I was like, it's funny. That's my exact thought was, I was like, this is Jim Carrey with Owen Wilson.
He goes,
Love child of Jim Carrey and Owen Wilson.
he goes,
I
I am
also
an Italian man. Yeah.
I didn't make this connection until right now, but I had mentioned earlier about Agatha Christie and Agatha Christie plays succeeding this, coming after this by a few decades. But I just went to go see The Mousetrap, and I'd never seen it before. And I will not spoil it. I will say there is a character who is an Italian man with a really big Italian accent who is played as like the character of the play.
Yeah.
And it's still done like that today. And I don't think people have an issue with it. So it's interesting to see this kind of earlier example of it.
Yeah.
Because obviously we are well versed and we have far too many examples of, and then we got to throw in this quirky character and to make them funny, European accent,
Yeah.
slap it on them. But it is interesting that one specifically in a crime comedy situation
Well,
to
even,
have an Italian man.
Like original Sweeney Todd versions were more melodramatic comedy, like before the musical of the 80s, and that still has the Pirelli character who it's an interesting archetype.
Yeah.
Who
is also faking his accent.
Yeah,
It is
because
like-
he's actually Irish.
Yeah.
It is kind of like you mentioned the roots obviously that this show probably has in vaudeville, and that was just a very common theme with a lot of vaudeville actors, is especially immigrant actors, they would play up certain elements of their sort of stereotypes. I mean, especially Jewish actors would sort of play up the
Mm-hmm.
Jewishness, and kind of like River, what she was saying, where it could be someone who's almost like taking advantage of the fact that, oh, well, I'm an Italian, so I'm going to really play this up for you because I'm just going to milk it for all it's worth. I guess the most modern equivalent would be like a Yakov Smirnov. It's not the most modern. But
we still have like examples of that too, of like people playing up identity for comedy.
Yeah. Or even like Borat, like something like that, where it's like someone's really, I don't know, sort of turning it back against the audience, like the expectations, and turning it back on them. So it doesn't necessarily age well, though, which is sort of the discussion we've had.
It's very interesting that we still kind of, in general, in society, accept Eastern European accents as, okay, that's, cool to do because that's white people, so it's fine. But in Europe, there's still a lot of like anti-Eastern European sentiment, so it actually still does perpetuate stereotypes and perpetuate like a kind of otherness. So I find it fascinating that especially in animated children's movies, there is oftentimes the silly clown character with an Eastern European accent, and it's so interesting that it's like, hey, why are we doing that? This is a kids movie.
You made me think of, this is a very fast thing, but in the Jimmy Neutron television show, they have a character who's like, I think she's supposed to. Do you know who I'm talking about?
Yes.
Bulby!
But then they also have, of course,
slap,
Bulby.
clap, clap, clap.
Bulby, who's like town dunce, and he has his like weirdo accent. But then there's
Like
also
from
a character,
bizarre
Slovenia.
Eastern European,
like so weird.
stereotype.
But there's also a character who I just think about this a lot, who is like presented as probably like a trans femme person who has an Eastern European accent in that show, who's like the lunch lady or something. She has a big bushy eyebrow.
Oh my
Do you
god,
remember?
you're right.
Yeah, and I
forgot.
It's funny because we also see oftentimes like queerness or transness associated with that same archetype, but I don't know. I don't have a thesis there.
Well, I think there's also like there's an association with Eastern European women and like aggression and toughness, and I think that's where it gets into the like, they're not feminine in the stereotype. They're these tough women, and I think that's where it starts to fall into the like trans woman stereotypes.
Yeah, which Antonio Verdi is not, but
every month we like to go over like favorite quotes and least favorite quotes, and I'm also going to add stage directions to this because, audience, I cannot emphasize to you how many stage directions there are.
And they're in the middle of every line. Like they're not separate like you would like kind of expect. Oh, like enter space, he crosses. It'll literally just say a character crosses to stage left in the middle of a line. And it's really confusing when you have a character is saying another character's name, because they also didn't differentiate where lines began very well. So it at times just looks like there's a new line starting, but actually you're just talking to the other character, and it's really the formatting of this play. It's things have come a long way since 1916.
Yeah, whoever typeset this was really saving on the ink. Or the paper. They went heavy on the ink, but yeah.
I think River brought up that insane stage direction yesterday that Antonio has.
There's like, I think it's maybe my second to last line is Antonio Verde is like, not even full words, but like kind of the beginnings of Italian syllables. And there's like maybe a paragraph beforehand talking about how there's beads of perspiration on his forehead. He's like dabbing his handkerchief against his. It's the longest stage direction I think I've ever seen. As though
it's like
we're
nearly
like
a full
pros.
page.
Yeah,
it's a lot.
For
and
like
then the
4
line is like,
syllables.
yeah.
Personally, I'm
So
fond
I
of
really-
the line. Oh yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I just hope that I conveyed that.
You did. You did a great job.
Personally, my favorite line is when they say "work, it's come at last."
All
It's a
that
In
very
unison.
interesting way to describe that feeling.
Yeah.
And it's weird
We
because
were
it says
laughing.
all say it, because you can't all say that. That's insane for like 8 people to say that at once.
We read
were
that and
laughing, yeah.
someone said that must be a mistake, and I said we're doing it.
But I always find that is the weirdest thing in a lot of plays. I find this in like Shakespeare plays, but also other regardless of era, weird moments where there's a line that everyone says, and otherwise this play has been relatively naturalistic, and then suddenly everyone says the exact same line at the same time. Like, where'd that come from?
Yeah, and if it's like a what, that's fine. But sometimes it's
Yeah.
like, we must get here now, and it's like, oh, okay.
Yeah, this one even had a stage direction in the middle of it that in unison we're all supposed to sigh as we say the second half of the line.
I didn't notice that.
My favorite line, actually series of lines, is that one scene where they just keep saying, "Be a good boy," and while they're tying each other up. Because it just felt like this oddly kinky scene in the middle, and then just like there's nothing else like that in the rest of the play.
Which can bring us to, do we think we should try to adapt this play, and what would a modern adaptation look like? And I think a modern adaptation should lean fully into that.
Yes.
Yes.
Very kink forward, kink positive. I had like a real thought about this where I was like, especially once you brought up the radio play version that begins with that, I'm like, a fun way to do this play would be to adapt it from the radio play version that has a more active tone apparently, and do it almost like the 39 steps, like just fully lean into the farce of it, fully lean into the like melodrama of it, have the stings, have the moments where everyone in unison says work, it's come at last, like really emphasized. Could be fun.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
That so before we talk about more about adaptations, I like to ask, should we do it at all? Does it hold up? Should we do this play, and how should we do it? That's
It's like it's fine. I don't think there's anything inherently wrong. It's not like it's irrelevant. I think it's still funny. The concept is still a funny concept. Like, you know, two mobs that try to rob each other. It's still fun. There are certain things that don't hold up super well, like the racial slur or the sexism or, you know, a variety of things that it's like, if you were to adapt this, maybe make some changes. But it's also the kind of thing where I'm like, if I was a small theater company and I was looking for the best play to do, I'm not sure I'd have any reason to choose it unless I was like, I want something that's just going to be a fun romp.
Yeah, I enjoyed doing it for this podcast, but as someone who would like to produce theater in the future, I don't think this will be on my list. I enjoyed it, but
Yeah.
there's other plays that do this kind of thing more successfully.
This feels like the play that a theater company produces after they do Angels in America to give everybody a nice little reset.
Yeah.
We blew all our budget on Angels in America, a gay Fantasia on national themes, but now we're gonna
Parts
do
1
it in
and
theaters.
2. Yeah.
If you have a
Yeah.
bunch of depressed high school kids and no budget, I would say go for it.
Yeah.
That'd be
Yeah,
fun.
exactly.
I would go watch this at a high school.
It is
Especially-
fun to produce. Like, it was fun to do.
Yeah, I think one of the many cool things about this show, and that I think this show can do for the world, is I feel like high schools that have like no budget and are doing a lot of public domain plays are just cycling through the same like 5 plays because that's all they know. And I think it's really cool to bring to light some things that are like, hey, you want to teach kids how to do a comedy, how to do theater, stuff like that, and you don't want to pay for rights. This works.
Right. If you
This
don't want
is
to,
for you.
if you don't want to build the noises offset, you can do cheating cheaters.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, I wanted to do noises off so bad as a kid.
Oh, we did it in high school, and it was great.
Oh.
I was one
For
of the
what
set
it's worth-
turnarounders.
Oh, that's so
Oh yeah. Just all the stage directions, you really could go pretty noises off with it. There's
You could,
a lot.
and like the thing is, like I've seen noises off so many times. Like it would be a fun break for me to watch a Cheating Cheaters.
Right.
Like
That's
after
also true.
seeing
Yeah.
noises off after noises off.
Right. Noises off is the funniest play. It just is. But yeah, sometimes you got to go for the second string just to mix it up.
And also, like, this would be far less technically complicated,
Yeah.
and fewer people have seen it. So it would be like, what's that? As opposed to being like, oh, they're doing
And
it
one
for
really
free.
nice thing about this play
I think-
is, since it's in the public domain, you really could kind of take some liberties with it, where I think there are a couple of these scenes that kind of, like, the first act is ungodly long. Like, it's 40 pages, and the rest of the acts are 20. I don't know why the first act has to be that long. You could absolutely...
The second drag acts for me.
Really?
That is, I think, why the 1932 radio version, my favorite thing to talk about, completely cut the first act, completely cut it, and replaced it with the boat scene, and then jumped right
Wait,
into
I
Act
didn't realize
2.
they completely
That's
cut
also-
Act 1. Because it feels like there is some kind of important
No, yeah, they
setup there.
completely cut it. No, so it's actually, I actually found it very interesting because this, I didn't want to say this because I didn't want to seem like the most underprepared dramaturg ever. But I mentioned this to Haz and Laura after I listened to it. I was like, oh, I think it might be a little different, and then they were like, oh, you don't have to read it. Like, it's probably mostly the same. So this was my first time actually reading the script, and I was like, oh, this is different. The way that they set it up is we first find out about. Also, I was gonna the role that I was like, oh, I kind of like this role, was not even in this. It's mostly about Tom and Rosie,
Oh my god.
who is Tom's accomplice, who plays his mom. So whoever was Mrs. Palmer. So in the radio version it was Rosie. So it's mostly following them. So we didn't even know that Ruth and the Brockton gang are even a gang until later. So it's like we're on the boat, and then Tom's mom is like, Tom, will you talk to me, please? I'm your old lady mother. And so it gave the same information, but it just was not ungodly long and wasn't a whole lot of Maiden Butler dialogue.
On the topic of the acts getting longer and longer, yeah, I think it's worth mentioning that the number of... Oh, my dog just ran in here. Go. It's okay. The number of curtain calls gets shorter and shorter after each act.
We should
Yeah.
talk about that. In addition to a lot of stage directions, every act ends with a significant amount of curtain calls. It says like curtain down, and then the curtain goes up and you see Ruth and Brockton, and then the curtain goes down and then you see Mrs. Brockton and Wilson, and then the curtain goes down and then the curtain goes up and you see Ruth and Tom. Like, every act had like 4 of them. One of them had 6 of them.
Except
That's
and,
bananas.
No, yes, except as River pointed out, the final act doesn't have a curtain call.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I do love the comedic potential of establishing every time that when the curtain goes down and up, someone will be there, and then just at the very last one, the curtain goes down, and you're like ready to cheer, and it's just no one.
That's the farce. That's the farce.
It's because
I
they've been
wonder
sent
if
off
that
to
was
work.
like a trend in 1916. I don't know.
It must have been.
I guess.
Or else this playwright is a genius. 'cause that's-
Yeah. I will say this is not something that I have researched, just purely something I have observed, is that plays from the early 1900s go heavy on stage direction, super specific. And that is something that I think we have rightly phased out. Because what is the point of a director, if obviously to direct the acting? But I mean, like, if I was a director and I was using the script, and, you know, so many of the stage directors are like, you know, he walks down center and does this. I'd be like, no, it's my stage now, baby. It's my stage now. You're not telling me what to do. You're dead, Max Marcin. You don't get to tell me where my actors go.
This is definitely one of those where even the props list was so in depth and included set dressings that like
there were like
listed,
a bunch of plants, right?
12.
Yeah,
Yeah.
12 palms
and
12
palms in
palms
bloom.
specifically. Yeah. It's like that was nowhere even in the incredibly long
They
stage
don't even
directions.
say like, "Oh, what a nice plant you have," or
Right.
12 plants you have.
And if
Why
it's
are
a
those
farce, like someone's
palms
gotta.
in bloom?
Yeah. In a farce, someone like has to at least trip on 6 of them if there's going to be 12. You know? But it wasn't there at all.
If someone is not tripping on a potted plant, did you even do a farce?
Yeah.
It's Chekhov's
If a
plant.
potted plant falls in the mansion. Yeah.
Oh, that's a good
I mean, in Noises Off, they do have a bunch of plants running around in Act 2.
Laura, I know you have apparently seen this like 80 times, but I mean, just I've never even heard of Noises Off. I don't even know if that's a shortening of the name of it, but
that's the name.
No,
That's the name.
No.
oh, okay. But
There's
like,
a pretty good movie version, I think.
It's a play within a play.
It's like if someone showed the rehearsal process for this play, that would be the play.
Mm-hmm.
gotcha.
As I was doing research about this and about, you know, just like farce in general, because I was like, you know, I've seen them, but I've never really researched it. Weirdly enough, the Wikipedia page on farce is very short. It just is like,
Really?
here's what it is, and if you want a contemporary example, Noises Off, and that was like it. Like that was like the whole page.
If you like farce, I have to say, and I know like it's a little overdone, and I'm sure everyone's seen like some of Frasier, but there is an episode of Frasier that is one of that's just the best modern examples of a farce I have seen in a very long time. Is the 5th season, episode 14, The Ski Lodge. It is 20 minutes of
my god! Yes!
where like
I was a big Frasier fan as a kid.
Yeah.
okay, cool.
I
cool.
love that one.
Yeah, same.
My favorite farce Frasier episode is the Valentine's Day one where Niles has a like completely silent like 10-minute sequence of getting ready for a date, and it's hilarious.
Yes.
I know that exactly.
So well done.
I remember
So good.
watching that as a kid and being like, oh my god, this is like comedic. Like the fact that they were able to pull off that whole last scene with no dialogue.
So good.
My favorite Frasier farce was when they have the homeowners association meeting and they're doing a murder mystery game and the guy actually dies.
Yeah.
The guy who's supposed to die actually dies, and but it's like they don't want to get kicked out of their apartment, and it's the homeowners association, so they have to like pretend that it's still a game, and they're like, oh,
We'll be able to look out for Has Alex and JJ's new Frasier podcast.
Hey, I like Frasier too. No.
Okay, you can come on too.
Cool, I'll be a guest.
It's actually a great concept. I think we should do it. We can analyze the socio-political implications of every Frasier.
Ooh, very into it.
Do we want to talk more about adaptations and how we would want to adapt this play, or we feel like we have said enough about that?
I feel good on that personally.
Okay, sounds good. So going into that, I'm
it
gonna
like Frasier.
Truly.
I'm gonna move on and give folks a chance to promote stuff. I'm gonna shout out your name, and you can promote anything that you want to promote. We will start with you, River.
Me, River. I don't really have anything to promote right now. But maybe in the future. That's me. I'm River. And my Instagram is ACR. Those are my dogs in the background. ACR.cool is me.
Excellent. Drew, anything?
I'm gonna second River. You know,
Okay.
maybe in the future, but yeah, my name's Drew Vollmer. You can find me out there.
Alex, you're always doing a bunch of cool stuff.
Oh, I'm doing so many things. So I will try not to take too much time. I'm Alex Kingsley, and I work with a company called Strong Branch Productions, and we make podcasts and we make tabletop games. And one of our podcasts is a sci-fi comedy called The Stench of Adventure. So if you like silly goofs, That's a fun one. We also just released our speculative anthology-style fiction podcast called Tales from the Radiator, and that's a little more spooky, scary. We just released our pilot season for that, which is only 3 episodes, but season 1, which is going to be about 20 episodes, is coming soon. So that's a fun thing. We also have an actual play podcast, if that's your thing. And then tabletop games as well. I designed those. They are on the internet. They are on Galaxy Quest. That's like the 1998 cult classic film Galaxy Quest, but it has my name instead. galaxyquest.itch.io. That is also my handle on Twitter and TikTok. So if you're on those places, Galaxy Quest. And you can also follow Strong Branch Pro, Twitter, Instagram, all that. Is that all the things? That's probably all the things.
Nice. JJ, is there anywhere people can come see you be funny?
So you can find me at JJ Tyson Comedy. I've been putting a little more effort into my social media game lately. Also, I'm going to be on what's it called? The radio in Palm Springs. So if you're in Palm Springs on Monday and listening to the radio, I'm apparently a friend of a friend got me this gig, and I think it's mostly because the person that she actually wanted to book needs a ride to Palm Springs. So I think she just brought me along for the ride. But I'm doing some kind
we'll
of
put your chauffeur on too.
Along for the ride, the JJ Tyson story.
Well, thank you for writing my memoir. That's perfect. Yeah, and I got some shows coming up, but I can't remember where any of them are. So you just look me up. I'll have this stuff posted there.
Sounds good.
Oh, I forgot something.
Tell us, Alex, what did you forget?
I'm the director of a new fantasy podcast, fiction podcast called Among the Stacks, which is really exciting and interesting, and I really
Is it
enjoyed
about a
it.
library?
It is. It's about a magical library.
Oh,
and it's
excellent.
so fun.
Wait, that sounds really cool.
Thank you, Alex. Do you have anything you want to talk about?
Yes. Well, sort of. I'm just gonna link to where you can find me. I started a link tree, which just gives you, if you don't know, is a place where you can go and find all of my links to different social media stuff. It's linktr.ee/thehazkaty. My name is spelled HAZCADY, and that's got links to Public Domain Plays podcast. I started a blog, which is mostly just going to be me talking about the Muppets for a long time. But that sounds great.
Yeah.
It's got my Twitter, which is also the Has Katie. It's got my archive of our own. It's got all kinds of stuff. And then you should follow Public Domain Plays on Twitter at PDPlaysPod. You can also email us at
publicdomainplays@gmail.com.
Thank you for picking up the cue.
You can find our website at publicdomainplays.com, and I just remembered that I need to update our website with our most recent episode, so I will be doing that. Yes, and we're on Facebook and Instagram as well, also as Public Domain Plays there. So check us out. We are having such a blast making this podcast and making new friends and doing old plays. So thank you for listening, because we're having a lot of fun making it.
Yeah. Thanks. Bye.
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 Bye, everybody.
Bye.